Unshelling Medicine podcast. Healthcare in the language we understand.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our episode today. So, I've gotten to know her, and I want all of you to get to know her as well and benefit from a conversation. So, I have Estefana Johnson with me today. So, Miss Johnson is actually a licensed clinical social worker. Takes heart, right? And also, she's a trauma therapist and also the trainer and director for Rise Alliance. So we're going to have useful conversation, deep conversations. And at the end of it is going to be a conversation that you're going to learn something from. I promise that. So Estefana, welcome. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you for having me. It's good.
Thank you for being here. So, licensed clinical social work. What attracted you to that career? Because that's heavy stuff.
You know, I accidentally fell into it. I think the stars aligned and it put me in this position. You know, being Hispanic, I never would have dreamed I'd be in mental health because it's not a thing that we really looked at as a career. But yeah, somewhere throughout my journey, there were certain things that occurred that kind of pushed me in that direction. And I ended up working as a behavioral health technician in a residential treatment center and just absolutely fell in love with behavioral health. It was really more of my wanting to better understand the system, better understand how you help individuals with trauma, better understand myself. And I think that became evident, over time. Then when I decided to do my master's, because the place I was working at told me, you're going to be a therapist. It wasn't like I chose that. And I thought, I don't even know. Do I get a say? But they're signing my paycheck. So I guess that's what I was going to do. And absolutely fell in love with working with people. And when I looked at the programs, I realized, the social work route kind of gave you more of a variety. And I'm such a person that I don't like repetition, so I always hold multiple roles, and so that just seemed like the right fit.
Beautiful. So going back on, what you said, something about being Hispanic, I never thought I would end up in, a profession like social work. And I can resonate with that because with my African background, social work and therapy is not something that is all common, right? I don't want to call it pride because it's really kind of a toxic pride in suffering in silence. Were you concerned about how you would be perceived by your community or family by going into a profession that is not that popular within the culture?
Well, earlier we were talking about being kind of like the odd person, being first generation, not speaking English. I didn't learn English till I was 5. I came from a very heavily religious background. I mean, part of a cult where women were not allowed to wear pants, not allowed to cut their hair, not allowed to have opinions or thoughts. Everything was very, very religious, a lot of rules. And I was just the outlier. I was outspoken. I had ADHD. I didn't even know I had ADHD as a kid, but I was always getting yelled at. I was always in trouble at school. So I just got used to not really following the crowd. I was always, that out person. So I think it just worked out to prepare me for the work that I was to do when I got older. But my parents, neither of them had college educations. Mom went to 3rd grade, dad went to 8th grade. And so I definitely come from, it was a lot of poverty, a lot of struggle, and education was not something that was even encouraged in my family. I remember being in high school and going to school, my mom asking me, like, where are you going? I'm going to school, Mom. You went yesterday. Why are you going again today? Like, you have to go every day. Like, you don't just go once a week. And, if it weren't like for the legally, you can't just take your kid out of school, I think they would have kept me home and told me all I needed to learn was how to wash dishes and take care of babies and keep the house clean and cook. That was my role as a woman. And so absolutely, I was like you, kind of one of them rebels that just did not march to the same beat of everyone else. And so going into behavioral health was just something that absolutely they were like, why are you doing that? Are you even going to make money? Why would you go to college for that? I don't know. It just called me. It's just something that I didn't plan on where it would take me. It just kind of, I kept going to the next step and next step. And as long as I was enjoying and learning, growing, I continued down that path. And here I am today.
Absolutely. That is incredible. Yeah. So for all the oddballs, it works out. It's okay.
There's a reason why you're odd. There's a reason you're odd. Yeah. There's a purpose to it.
Absolutely. There's a reason why you don't think like everybody else. You're not doing the thing that everybody in the family is doing. You know, you question. That's the one thing that I've noticed doesn't bode well in a very regimented culture and household. When you are naturally curious, you ask questions. You know, it's often seen as disrespect or whatever else is going to be attached to it. It's okay. It works out. It's not you. It's not you. I promise it's not. So given that experience, has that helped you in a sense with your career, where empathy for, say, a young star who may be in like a similar situation where they're constantly in the principal's office, they're constantly being complained about by their family members, or they feel like they don't have support and all they really want to have is to be heard, whether it's, you know, related to a traumatic event or just simply existing?
Yeah, I think all of it was preparing me, and it absolutely impacts the way I practice, because when you're part of the outlier, you don't fit the mainstream. And everything in my household was, you got to pray about it. You know, everything was just, you're battling demons and you got to pray about it. And I'm like, no, there's a skill I need to learn. And there was not a lot of agency that was encouraged, because that meant that you might make decisions that were out of line with what you were told that you needed to be, who you were told you needed to be. But those of us that are outliers are like, there's something deep inside that pushes you beyond that comfort zone. And leaving the religion, leaving my home, it cost me all my relationships, you know, and I have much respect now for that 19-year-old that could not stay in a place where she was incongruent with who she truly was, you know, that didn't know where it was leading, didn't know what the outcome was going to be, and yet could not stay within the safety of familiarity. It just was not an option. And it's a painful path. So as you talk to people who feel that way, you can't follow a map that's been written, because that means somebody else has been there, and that's not your path. You have to look inwardly to discover your path, to discover your purpose. And that's the scariest part about this, but it's also the most freeing part. Once you learn how to look within and trust yourself, things start making sense in your own journey, but it cannot be in the context of somebody else's expectations or what their reality is. And that's the hardest part about this, but also the most beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And thank you for sharing that. In the time being, when you're in the thick of things, to make that decision, it's not usually pretty. You know, there's a lot of internal battles. Nobody wants to be an island. Nobody wants to be isolated. However, sometimes that is what the journey calls for. You know, that isolation to really expose you to the people that are there to build you up and push you to that path where you belong, where you align to be. So thank you so much for sharing that. And often with that journey, it usually takes one person. It usually takes that one person to say, you know what? No, there's got to be more. This can't be it. And then others kind of fall in line. Did that happen for you? Did you see that, you know, even people older than you look to you as a lighthouse of sort, like, she can do it?
Yes.
I can try.
That is how I practice. Yeah. I tell people, like, in order to discover who you are, sometimes you have to discover who you aren't. You have to let go of who you aren't. And to start looking for incongruences that just don't quite fit. It doesn't quite hit right. Because when it's truth, it just falls into place. There's something deep inside of you that lets you know this is truth. And that is like following your intuition, but it's just really tuning into what you carry inside. You carry that path inside of you, right? It'll guide you if you learn to tune into it. And that is, as we speak, when I first started in the field, a lot of the approaches that I was taught, it seemed like there were ways of quieting down what we call signals. You know, persons struggling with anxiety, and we give them tools for breath work and for regulation or emotion management. And those are all absolutely valuable tools. but there were limitations because you're constantly managing these things that keep coming up and you don't really figure out why it keeps coming up. And so those pieces, the disruptions that were happening, I had to better understand why is it that this thing arose such anger in me? Why is it that this approach just felt like wrong at a deeper level? And you can deal with the feeling or sensation and try to tune it out, desensitize it or manage it. But until you learn how to uncover what it's telling you, we stay stuck in this loop of never finding out who you truly are. And so a lot of the approaches that I use, especially as a trauma clinician, were really targeting symptoms like the nightmares, the flashbacks, these things, but it wasn't quite integrating those experiences into helping the individual find their purpose, find out who they truly are. And so that was part of the journey that we did that led us to creating critical memory integration. And that's what I've been seeing. It's what worked for me that helped me make these connections. It's what I'm seeing with clients who are able to not only overcome their trauma, but they're able to transform it. It becomes a purpose. It becomes their passion, and it guides. It serves as information about what their path is, before them. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch, to uncover. It's amazing. I get to do it.
That's so satisfying. I think for society, this is going to be kind of like a comment and a question in one. As a society, uncovering things is not something that we choose first because it's uncomfortable, right? Delving into why is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront things that you kind of like put back there, right? And it's easier to address and treat the symptoms as opposed to going to uncover that. How difficult is that process when you're working with your clients to really get down to the why? Why is this enacting such a deep emotional response from me? Let's walk back that path. And also in your practice, do you see, I don't want to use the word easy, but do you see a more of an easier getting to the bottom of it with a younger
more efficient?
Maybe more efficient. That's it.
Yes,
that's the
that's
word.
exactly what we're doing. More efficient.
Social worker, she knows the words. All right.
So, being in the medical field, I'm sure you've come across individuals that there's medication to treat something, but there's things that could be treated just by changing the diet alone.
Yeah.
And that's going to be more long-term, right? More organic. And that's essentially what we're looking for. What is the most organic way with someone who can go through adversity and not get stuck? And as you share about the difficulty, I try to normalize it as much as possible. Sure. I tell people like, hey, this is part of the standard human package. We all have a nervous system. We all have this brain, and this is how it works. And there's two things that make this particularly challenging. Number one, we are creatures of habit. Like, we like familiarity. Familiarity feels safe. And the older we get, the more we want familiarity. I give the example of when I lived in Japan for a couple of years. And when I moved over there, I knew not a lick of Japanese. And it took all but like a week or two before I was like starving for some kind of interaction. And I ended up finding the Starbucks downtown and sat there for 8 hours, sipping on lattes, waiting to hear someone speak English. And the moment I heard the barista speak English, I ran up to her, was like, please be my friend. I was so desperate for someone who understood my language, and it's because it's familiar. Yeah. It's easier to communicate, and with connection, that familiarity, it feels like home. Unfortunately, it's the same with adversity, with the way we speak love and connection. Sometimes we get stuck in these loops of like toxic relationships or things that we know are unhealthy, but they're familiar. And our brain is like a prediction machine. So it wants to look for the places that are familiar because it's not necessarily safe as in like, that's the best thing for you, but it's safe in the sense that I have the tools to get through that, or I know it's predictable and it's familiar. So that's one reason why we get stuck, right, in these familiar loops. The second one is that it is uncomfortable to step into the unknown. It presents a risk because you never know what's going to be there. And that's a gift of when we are the outliers. Sometimes we feel like that. the unknown is what we have for breakfast every day. We never know what's going to show up.
Yeah.
I mean, for me with ADHD, I'm like, I never know what's coming out my mouth. Like, we're both surprised. It's very impulsive. So those things, getting comfortable with discomfort is the first thing that we practice. And sometimes that comes from that inspiration of desperation, that you're so tired of being stuck in these loops. And I tell people, if you are stuck in familiar loops, if you feel confident about where you're going, you're probably in the land of familiarity, which means you're going in circles, right? The moment you step out and something feels uncomfortable, that means you're no longer going in circles. Now we're moving forward. Now we're at the growth point. And that's the number one thing that when I have a client come in that we discuss and we talk about, normalize these things. But be intentional with the direction that you're going. There's a difference between running away from something or moving towards something. And we really want to move towards authenticity, something that fits better than where you are right now or what you're doing right now. So that's absolutely, number one of the hardest things. But also once you learn to embrace that, life becomes so much clearer, even when you face adversity, because adversity is going to come no matter what. It catches all of us, right? But navigating through it is what you could do with more ease and clarity, because you know who you are, and what informs you comes from within, not from outside of you. So that's the beauty of it.
That's very important, because we live in a world that extrinsic motivators are heavy. And people often forget that the intrinsic is the most important, especially, like the example that you gave about your upbringing, depending on what the pastor says or what the rules are, as opposed to what you're feeling in this time, right?
Yes, about what's right.
What was right? So a lot of people get stuck in that loop, and some people want out. They don't know how. And some people question it, but they don't know if they want out or they just want to remain in that comfort. What would you say to anybody listening to us who, one, is like, okay, no, I think I am a detriment to myself at this point if I continue this way. And somebody that is not so sure is like, am I or am I not? Is it safer this way? Is the risk worth it? What would you say to either of those groups of people or to both of them at once?
I would say the very fact that you're listening to this podcast, that you're looking, there's a part of you that is searching. There's even the smallest part deep in there that is saying, looking for something. It might be terrifying to think about that, but if you really were at ease and at peace, you wouldn't be looking. So I start there. I have often had clients who come in, I work a lot with complex trauma, severe trauma, and they tell me they struggle with a lot of self-hatred, a lot of really low self-esteem or worthlessness because of their experiences with the world and how they've been maybe misunderstood or mistreated or, trauma that they've endured. And when they walk through my office, they carry a lot of shame for how they survived those things. Maybe some of the things that they do. So let's say someone struggles with irritability. I had a lot of anger when I was growing up. And so it came off in my snarkiness, my defiance, my attacking. And it's not who I am.
Yeah.
But that was what kept me safe. And so when an individual comes, especially I'll have like a veteran who struggles, I'm going to carry some heavy, heavy stuff, or someone who comes as an asylum seeker that carries horrific pain. And they tell me, how do I know which one is the real me? Is it this part or that? I always tell them, if you were okay with that part, you wouldn't be here right now asking. You wouldn't be seeking. So even though that's all you know, there's something in you that continues to drive you to seek for answers. That's how I know that's not the real you, because the real you would be okay with what you're doing. It would feel aligned with who you are. And there's something misaligned. So that's what's letting us know. If you feel something, if you're listening to this, something in you is saying, there's something more for us. This is not who we are. This is not what life is about. You were made for something more. Follow that. Lean into that. Feel afraid, unknown, all that stuff, but step towards it. Because I promise you, at the end of the road, And I read a lot of books that had to do with death and dying, earlier on in my career, because I like to go towards the thing that scares me. I just want to know what about it scares me. Turn on the light and grab a chancla and go after it, figure it out. And I remember the top 2 regrets of death and dying is I wish I didn't care so much about what other people thought. And I wish I was not too scared to do what I really wanted to do with my life. And I refuse to get to that point at the end of the line. So if there's a part of you that is saying there's something more, you have to lean into it. You have to. Because sitting here and surviving, that's not living. It's not the same as living. There's more to life, and it's calling you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah. A lot of people live their lives based on opinion of others, and I want us to just dissect that a little bit, especially from a cultural standpoint. How important is the environment for anybody embarking on a healing journey? So there's this adage that you can heal where you were hurt, and the person who hurt you cannot heal you, right? So if somebody's actively in an abuse situation, whether it was a molestation or whatever it is, or physical or whatever abuse that is, and they're constantly in the environment that either puts them down, belittles them, or continues that abuse, but because of the familiarity that the brain craves, they continue in that environment. However, something deep within them is telling them there's got to be more to life than this. How important is a change in that environment to a healing person, especially culturally when we fear being ostracized?
100%. Yeah. I think it's important to first understand what it is to be human, right? When I talk about you, when I say you, there is one core you, and that's the conscious awareness that you have of your experience. Everything else is an experience. Now you have to understand what I call your meat suit, right? Your body, the standard human package, and how it is wired to survive.
Right.
So our nervous system is wired in such a way to protect your life. And if there's any threat to your well-being and you're not actively protecting yourself or setting those boundaries, it will kick in and it will override your response. And at that point, you have no agency because it's not a choice, it's a reaction. So if the environment that you're in presents a danger to your health and well-being, if there's abuse, physical abuse, or there's a history of that and there's ongoing verbal or threat, then it's going to be very difficult for you to sit and introspect, for you to connect with the most vulnerable parts of you that need to be discovered, because it's not safe. And your nervous system will override your agency. It will kick in. You go into fight or flight, or the appeasing, because people pleasing is one of the ways that we adapt as well. And neither of those will lead you towards authenticity. They are survival strategies. They're adaptive responses that their sole purpose is to keep you alive, not to discover who you are. So you have to be in a place that is not feeling like a constant threat in order to do some of this work. It doesn't mean that you can't do some of it to prepare yourself to get out, like understand those things so that you can have a plan. But absolutely that could be a challenge if, it's like nobody can do math if there's bullets flying through the room. It's just, your brain's not going to work.
Right.
It's gonna go towards survival. The people that you're around, because you might say, like the community you said, let's say you're in a marriage or a relationship or something, and it's not possible to exit yet, depending on the dynamics. Like I've had individuals where they're living as roommates. There's no like physical threat or something like that. Absolutely. You could take that time to do some of this discovery and a better understanding of yourself, but it really depends on that threshold.
It's very important for people to know. I asked this question specifically because society has been wired to question people, men, women, and why didn't you just leave, right? Why didn't you?
Yeah.
Can you talk about how damaging that statement is?
That is so damaging. And I work with people. If you look up like the hierarchy of needs, where we have food, safety, like housing, there are things that you think logically you could make a choice easily, right? So for example, for any one of us and anybody listening, we all know that eating out of dumpsters is a bad idea. Why? Because, You
It's a
have,
dumpster.
it's a dumpster. It's nasty. You don't know who's eating that stuff. You don't know what's in the dumpster. And as long as we are in a state where we can make that decision with agency, we can choose not to do that.
Yeah.
But if any one of us, if we went into like a situation, zombie apocalypse or whatever the heck, or there's no food, there's food scarcity, and we haven't eaten in 4 days, your survival mechanism is going to override your logic. That sandwich in the dumpster is going to look pretty tasty because it's about surviving, not thriving. And so anything related to survival, it's going to be very difficult to step out, to try to go into the growth zone if your basic needs are not met. When we're talking about situations like, let's say an assault, because I have heard that before, why didn't you scream? Why didn't you run away? When your nervous system kicks in, there's certain aspects of your brain that might shut off. For example, one might be that Broca's area that, controls the language.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have access to them. You don't have access to using your voice in that moment. That's what happens with some people when they freeze or when they collapse. When you're in a domestic violence situation, your life is being threatened. And unfortunately, we know with society, our system is not structured in a way to prevent.
Yeah.
It's structured in a way that after the fact,
reactive.
It becomes, the burden is placed on the victim to prove that something happened, right?
Yep.
That's what innocent until proven guilty means. It means the burden of proof is placed on the victim. If the victim has already been victimized and is already in a state of trauma, that victim probably doesn't even have the energy to barely survive, much less try to formulate a case against the very individual who caused that trauma. So there's so many factors that contribute to this. It's not just a matter of logic. We can be, what is it? They call it Monday night quarterbacking.
Yeah.
Oh, you shoulda, woulda, coulda. You ain't on the field. You could shoulda, woulda, coulda all you want. But you are speaking from a place of ignorance because that is not the way the body works. So it's important to understand that piece because this is how our nervous system is wired. Mm-hmm. And, situations like domestic violence, we know that individuals, the most risk is when they're on their way out. That is typically when their life is taken.
Absolutely.
And so there's so many factors that contribute to this.
Mm-hmm. That Monday night quarterbacking, if I were in this situation, I would do this, but you weren't. And
and you don't understand.
You don't understand. You don't know how you're going to react when you're in that situation. It's not, if you don't have anything constructive to say, it's better not to, because if somebody is vulnerable enough to communicate a traumatic event, whatever that may be, just if you can offer a shoulder, that's it, or an ear. Yeah. If you don't understand it, you don't understand it, and that shouldn't be a burden placed on everybody to completely understand. Because again, we don't all live the same lives. However, refrain from saying something that could completely dismantle somebody. So on the other flip side of that, going back on that cultural nuance a little bit again, what do you say to the culture of endurance?
Endurance is. It was funny you talk about that because I think that was sometimes when we have trauma, we become savages, man. We're just all about survival. And we have such a hard time with self-compassion. And I myself struggled with that because it's like, get up, dust it off, and keep going. Get up, dust it off, right? And we think that is resilience. And resilience that's an aspect of it, but we all survive differently. So for me, early on in this field, and we all have, I don't care what therapist is listening, you could be judgy as you want, but you're just lying to yourself if you don't have this. At the beginning, we all have individuals that we really understand better and connect to, and those that we're kind of not really wanting to work with. And for me, before, it was people who really were in that helpless state. Yeah. And because my survival mechanism was a fight or flight, right? Fight, go through it, do something, move, mobilize. What I had learned over time, and I learned so much from my clients, is that because my nervous system chose this and theirs chose the collapse or the appeasement, does not make my adaptive behavior any different, right, than what they used to adapt. The issue is the same. The issue is that what we're doing is not working, is not aligned with who we really are. And once I kind of switched my mentality around that, I've been able to work with these individuals, some of the best cases, because it's such a hard thing to work with things like people pleasing. And so I see this a lot with women. You're taught to not show a lot of anger, you just be pleasant, be nice, be kind, all of this about your character. And that's the beauty of being a lady. It becomes an adaptive response for the lack of boundaries, lack of self-protection, those type of things. And for me, something like mine, like the fight, it's very evident I need to work on it, right? Because not only does it bother me, but it bothers everyone around me. And you get to adulthood and HR is not okay with you, like, popping someone, because that's not effective conflict resolution.
Right.
But so there's a lot of external pressure to change that adaptive response. But someone who people pleases, oh, the world loves that. Your job loves that. The people around you love that. And so only you know that it's detrimental for you. And that becomes so difficult to undo, because you're going against the grain. You're going against everything outside of you that's telling you do more of that. So, that was a humbling lesson for me to grasp and understand that these adaptive responses, these way of surviving, everybody's is different. And only you know what aligns with who you are and what doesn't. And only you can kind of sift through that and do the work to align yourself, like to be more authentic and be able to take the reins, to feel like you're living your life, not just surviving it.
Absolutely. You brought in HR, and I want to talk about that really quickly. Not quickly. You can take your time with it,
Yeah.
So we've talked about trauma, and mostly we focused on like personal, family, community type stuff. When it comes to work trauma, that's the real thing, right?
Yes.
So what are the ways one can realize or recognize that the experience at work is not normal, and whether they're people pleaser or they're the combustibles, right? What is the right, if somebody comes to you in your practice, like, Estefana, I'm going through this at work, and my manager is this, my manager is that, I'm feeling anxiety every morning when I wake up, and it's time to get ready for work. And with every phone call, every ring of the phone, I'm jumping out of my skin. And this is a career that somebody believes, because, we often start with that belief that this is my dream career. This is a career that somebody believes is their dream career. How do we manage that?
Well, that's part of us aligning. This is like the role that critical memory integration plays, right? Is that I'll explain really quick the critical memory so I can kind of put in how that works. What we do, how we view the world, how we understand the world and ourselves comes based of our library of experiences, like what we went through, what we learned about the rules of life as we were growing up. A lot of these are developmental experiences that lead to how we respond to things, whether survived by people pleasing or survived by fighting or flying or whatever it is, right? But when we get to adulthood, these things start impacting us. So it's not just trauma. It's when what we're doing and how we're living does not align. It does not bring us joy. It does not feel aligned. Does not feel congruent. And when you're feeling that resistance, so someone might be like, well, yeah, logically, you don't like your job, leave, right? But something's keeping them there. And, I went through this as well of making leaps before not knowing where I was going, but not everybody has that, because it usually led me to a better place. But first, we've got to understand that the world is what the world is. There are injustices. Everybody's on their own journey. Not everybody's going to catch things, and not everybody's intentionally out to hurt, inadvertently hurt. Some are intentionally out to hurt, but because we come from different places and different realities, really, there's always this risk of how things kind of play out. And so there was a quote I read one time. I forgot who it was, but he said, there's not enough leather to cover the world, so you cover your feet. Right? So you put shoes on so you don't hurt yourself. So it comes down to first being curious about how you're experiencing the work environment, how you're experiencing those interactions. Because the truth is, if Sally's having a bad day and is rude and disrespectful, Sally's got some issues that she's working through. She doesn't seem happy. It has nothing
I'm not
to do
working
with
through it all. She has issues.
well, maybe she's not working through it. She doesn't have the awareness, you know? But a lot of people, I tell people, why are you arguing with Stevie Wonder? Because he can't tell you if your shirt looks good. He can't see what your shirt looks like, right? If they're blind to it, why are you sitting there arguing about it? You're going to be really frustrated and lost, and we get stuck in these cycles because these, I call them 4-letter words: wish, want, and hope. You wish things weren't that way. You hope things get better. You want people to understand and listen. It ain't happening, honey. So we got to start with first reconciling with the truth of what is. Here's how things are. And I'm going to tell you something, coming from like as a minority, right? First generation Mexican American, Hispanic, not knowing English. I have every excuse in the world for failure to accept. Yeah, I've gone through things where there's like racism or, you know, especially those little, what do they call them? The microaggressions all the time. I just laugh. I'm like, oh, look at them. They're so cute. Like, just,
I know.
You know, like, you don't think I belong here, but I'm going to make my space. Excuse me. Con permiso. Con permiso. That's my chair right there. You know, you can choose to accept that as truth or not. That is where your agency lies. And those of us who refuse, I don't care what the world is telling me. I decide if I'm enough or not.
That's right.
I decide that. And we have to understand that truth, that you cannot allow these situations to occur around you without your permission. Your experience of it, you're giving permission. And I don't mean that you're responsible for your work environment, right? But you are responsible for deciding if there's a reason why you're staying there. If you're staying there, you're like, Steph, right now I have a goal and I'm going to do this and I'm going to save this much money and I'll get out at this point. You have an end point. Do it with intention. Know why you remain there. Yeah. And if everything inside of you says, well, there are other opportunities, I can leave, and there's this thing, then be curious about why you're stuck. What is chaining you to that? That's the work to do and to work through so that you can reclaim agency over your life. That's what we do with the critical memory integration, because oftentimes it's not a logic decision. There's something that has been wired way before the situation that led to how I'm responding. My nervous system thinks that I have to do this or I might die. Yeah. You know, as a kid, we have to make the situation work. You know, 3-year-old can't be like, well, this is a toxic environment. I'm going to move out. You don't have a choice. Yeah. You have to disconnect from that. And that's where we start pleasing or, you know, feeling like we don't have a choice. Unfortunately, we don't always update that. So we get to adulthood. Now we're a grown person that can make those choices, but we don't, because we're working off of old intel, old information, outdated experiences. That's what integration is about. It's updating, saying, yeah, this is part of your story, but that is from back there. You're no longer that 5-year-old. You're no longer that child. You're now a grown adult. And you can choose to accept that reality, or you can choose to create your own. And that's what we're helping people do, is to reclaim their agency over their lived experience, in spite of what everybody else says. You ever heard of the 4-minute mile, the guy with the 4-minute mile?
No.
I love his story. So back in like the 50s, the doctors used to think that if you ran faster than a 4-minute mile, your heart would explode. And this fool decided, I am going to break that record.
I love him already.
Against all the rules, against all of the brilliant minds out there, what the science was telling him. And he decided he was going to break it. And he did. And guess what happens after he broke it? That's like the minimum standard. And this is so many of us that historically, you know, as a minority, yeah, here's the reality of what has happened in my situation, that there's been suppression, there's been oppression, there's been, you know, racism or this or that, prejudice. And I'm like, be like water. Find a way. There's a crack somewhere you can slip through. Those that are disrupting, that refuse to accept that as a reality, those are the ones at the front lines. We were born to make changes. Yeah. So step into it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So the world is the world. I say to my students, people will always people. If I expect people to people, there's no reason for me to be mad and bent out of shape, you know? You're just peopling. So, you know, No expectations, cool. Got it. So I know how to navigate myself around you, right? So there's no point of me being upset. Oh, you should have done this. You could have done this. It's not fair. What if you don't know what fair means? So is that my burden? It's not my burden. If I take it on, yes, it becomes my burden. And we as humans, we need to learn tools. We need to update the operating system, right?
I don't even know why that word exists, honestly, in the English language. Why does
What
the word
word?
fair exist? Like, what about life is fair? You know, people are born, like, even from how we enter the world, like, some are born into families that are poverty, war-torn countries. Some are born into, like, wealthy families. You know, it was not me. Like, what's fair? Some have great genes. They could eat whatever they want, and they're like size 3. And I'm like,
Not me.
I can eat a donut. That is not me. What is fair about life?
I know. I think it's just one of those psychological entrapments of expectations.
And
You know,
wish, want, hope. Yeah.
So it's just, fairness, it has to go my way. It doesn't. And you have to find ways around it. And talking about the 4-mile test, that is ways around stuff. And the one thing, this is how my brain works. Forgive me, Estefana. So this is how my brain works, right? I'm like, I need to know the first person that took a bite out of a strawberry. Like, what about that fruit did not scare you enough? It's red. It has all these dimply, pimply seeds. But you took the risk to bite into it. And to find out it didn't kill you, right? And so many of the things that we eat, right? Even with pufferfish, there's a certain aspect of the pufferfish that is poisonous. Like, how did we discover that, okay, this side is good, the other side will kill you? So it takes that daring to step out and say, you know what? It just did not work out for me this way. How can I equip myself to just turn the ship around and face another direction? And that is not everybody has that intrinsic fight or flight, like you mentioned. Some people have to build up to it. Some people need support through it. And that's okay. As long as you are determined to do the work, because the work is not going to do itself, right? As long as you are determined to do the work and find the appropriate support system, that's all that matters. Really, your life is your life. Your journey is your journey. Your journey is nobody's journey. So what anybody would have done, that is their journey and that is their story to tell. It is not your story. Do not compare yourself to other people. That is the greatest killer of dreams and happiness and joy. You are your own person. You have your own path. What somebody else did is their journey, and that's okay. And we applaud them for it. So learn to path for your own self. So I love this conversation so much.
And we need all kinds of people. I wasn't born to be a housewife. I tried, Lord knows I tried almost 2 whole weeks. And I was miserable. You know, when me and my husband were living in Japan, and I'm getting up in the morning, making him breakfast at 5 a.m., waiting to make him dinner when he gets home from work. And it did not take long for me to find out, like, no, this is not for me. Some people find joy. You know, they want to have 6 kids and they love doing the little Pinterest lunches. And it's awesome. It's beautiful to watch. Do that. We need people like that to raise kids. You know, my kids get, like, I tell them, you got a mom from Wish. Like, it's a little bit off, but we make do, and they got good senses of humor. So I'm good with that. The resiliency is there. But it's find your thing, whatever your passion is. You want live in the woods and fish? Awesome.
Go for it.
Everybody's different. We're all built for different things. That's the beauty of this world.
Yeah.
But it's when we try to fit someone else's template.
Yeah.
That's when we lose ourselves. And honey, you're the only one that's guaranteed to be with you the rest of your life. If you do not have that relationship right, I don't know what happens at the end, because I think she goes with you or he goes with you. It's not a good thing. You have to learn to connect with you, live right by you, be authentic to you.
And I don't think people understand the weight of regret. It's not something that I want to taste. Just be yourself. Do what makes you happy, regardless of how others think or feel. Again, journeys are very individual. So, Estefana, with our listeners, right? Because I really want them to find you and work with you. Should anybody be on a journey of self-discovery or just needing a compass of sort? right? Because we all do need compasses for this journey called life. How can they find you? How can they align with you, the organization, and so on?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Well, our organization, we develop critical memory integration, which is a therapeutic approach. Unfortunately, because it's kind of newer, there's such a desperate need for practitioners.
Yeah.
And so if there's, anybody who works in the mental health field that would like to know how to facilitate that and how to help people connect to themselves, that would be the number one thing that we would love to share with practitioners. In addition to that, I have developed other programs for non-mental health professionals, like one program called Compass Within that helps to teach some of the skills to do some of that internal work and know how to connect. And so, you can connect with our organization and request that. I mean, I could run it virtually as well. I've been doing that for a couple of organizations here, one of the city where I live and foster care organizations. So we do have other options to help provide some of the tools. If you have, when you're doing this internal journey, it requires you to sit with discomfort. And if you're in a place where some of your experiences are pretty severe, it's kind of like, I look at it like if you're recovering physically, there's a place where physical therapy will push you, right, to grow, or having a personal trainer pushes you to get stronger. But if you're in a place where you have broken bones, that is not the time to do that.
No.
You need to allow yourself the space to heal so that then you could do that piece. So if you have, trauma memories where you're suffering those symptoms like flashbacks, then find a professional to help you through that piece so that we can get to the rest of the growth aspects that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But the practitioner, the approach is called critical memory integration. Our organization, you can find information at arisealliance.org. It's a nonprofit organization, and we're always evolving and developing and connecting with the community. So feel free to contact us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And that was such an aligned moment. I said Compass and your program is internal. I did not know that. To put that out there. Oh my goodness. That is such an alignment. I'm tingling on the inside. So you left us with a lot of gems. And the one thing that I usually ask my guests at the end of the show is, do you have any golden nuggets to share with the listeners? What is the thing or few things that you would impress upon anybody listening to us today to apply to their life where they are, which can apply to anybody?
If I gave one of the pieces of advice I give people, because they ask, how are you strong, or how do you do all this? And I tell them, I make sure that I fall apart at least once a month just for good old self-care. I let myself feel what I need to feel. And I think we're so afraid to allow ourselves to be human. And so if I was to share something that you're not probably going to hear from anywhere else, is allow yourself to feel what you need to feel. Allow yourself to experience. When you fall apart, it's like the breakdown is the only path to a breakthrough. That's when you'll have a breakthrough, because at some point you'll get to the end of that breakdown, and just from sheer exhaustion probably, and that's okay. But that's where you're going to find that quietness. You're going to find that space that is going to reveal the truth to you about what is important to you, about what doesn't align with you. And so that would be my advice.
I love it. I absolutely, coming from a professional who does this for a living, it validates me because that is the one thing I set time for. Because, in a world where you're handling so much and you're finding yourself in so many spaces and being so many things for so many people.
And you witness so much. You witness so much suffering. Yeah.
And there's a tendency to take that on. This Trojan soldier kind of mentality, you can only pile on so much without you becoming a basket case yourself. So
yes.
I do permit myself to fall apart. And what really broke the dam this month, or this last few months? Okay, just get in a puddle, fetal position, whatever feels comfortable in the time or at the time. Just be in that moment. And that clarity it's something that comes after all of that. And you
Yes.
can really see through a lot of things. Okay. All right. Okay. Cool. All right. So redirection, just like you reroute yourself on the GPS, you can reroute how you manage things, manage people, relate to people, and who do you really want in your life.
And who you want to be. Yeah.
And who you want to be is very important. So I thank you for validating me. I appreciate that. And for everybody listening, that is such great advice or suggestion, whatever feels best for you, how you can handle, taking that in. Give yourself permission to fall apart. It does not have to be with anybody. You can have your alone time fall apart in the closet, bathroom.
Yes.
Just give your space time to.
I tell people, grab you a tissue box, grab you some eye drops, and you can even get a sad movie just to get it all started, for the warm up or whatever you need to get you in the mood. Some really depressing music, whatever it is that you need to really enhance that. Set the mood and commit. Give yourself, if you're scared, do like an hour. Put a timer for an hour. Give yourself a limit. But allow yourself, lean into it.
I love it. Just lean in. Yeah, it's worth it. I feel validated. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So, thank you all of you for listening. I got a lot out of this conversation. A lot was validated for me, and also I learned a lot more. The premise of this platform. Oh my goodness. It's such great opportunity to have you. And, like I said to you earlier before we started recording, I was looking forward to this conversation for all these weeks, and it did not disappoint at all. And my prayer is that it did something for somebody wherever you may be in the world. You're not alone. You may feel that way. You're not. You're not crazy about the way you feel, wanting more either. And don't let anybody make you feel like it's unrealistic to want more for your life. I mean, it's your life. You know what would make you happy. Go for it. So please go check out Estefana. I will make everything about her program, organization, very much available in the show notes. So even if you didn't catch it, we'll put everything there. So you just click and you find her. We'll also write a LinkedIn newsletter, and you can go there and find her and read the article. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for listening. Thank you so much again for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Unshelling Medicine Podcast. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Altruistic Scribe on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We share additional tips, updates, and health-related content that you won't want to miss. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us at altruisticscribeco.com. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and tackle the health topics that matter most to you. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.